The world of television has been shaken to its core, split open by a grief that feels too heavy to carry. Anthony Giri, a towering pillar of American daytime drama, has reached the end of his remarkable journey, passing away at the age of 78 on December 14th, 2025, after severe complications following surgery. This was not the quiet fading of a familiar name. It was the sudden collapse of something vast and enduring. For more than 40 relentless years, he was never simply part of General Hospital. He was its pulse, its unrest, its living nerve. Through the creation of Luke Spencer, he became a force that reshaped an entire medium, binding millions of viewers to their screens as though their own hearts were being unfolded in real time. With a record 8 Daytime Emmy Awards, Anthony Giri did not merely succeed. He redrew the boundaries of what daytime television was allowed to be, proving it could hold darkness, contradiction, rebellion, and raw human suffering without blinking. Yet behind the brilliance lived a man burdened by expectation, isolated by legend, and slowly worn down by the cost of becoming unforgettable. This moment is not just goodbye. It is the extinguishing of a fire that once taught television how to ache and bleed. An era has been wounded. Before the story moves forward, pause with reverence. What follows is not praise alone, but remembrance of a life that gave everything it had. There is a cruel pattern to the world, one that tests its most sensitive spirits first. Anthony Giri entered life already carrying that weight. Born on May 29, 1947, under the cold skies of Colville, Utah, he arrived in a home defined by faith, fatigue, and endurance rather than ease. His father, Russell Dean Geary, labored on roads from before sunrise, hands split and spines slowly bowed by work that offered no applause. His mother, Dana Anderson Geary, served her church and family with quiet devotion, stitching warmth and mercy into a household where winter never fully loosened its grip. As the youngest child and only son, growing up beside his sisters Diane and Jana, Anthony learned early that survival rarely announced itself. Dignity was something you earned in silence. Years later, he would admit with striking honesty that he never felt the world was his by right. He believed he would have to fight simply to exist within it. Colville was stark and beautiful, generous at dawn, and unforgiving by night. For a boy carrying unnamed storms, it felt like a room with the door locked and the horizon just close enough to hurt. While others found comfort in routine, Anthony found refuge in the flicker of a small local theater, where wounded heroes and broken souls mirrored emotions he could not yet speak without shattering. He filled notebooks with names, scenes, and fragments of performances, drawn not to perfection, but to pain. Alone under dim light, he practiced faces and voices, becoming many lives at once, while his mother watched from a distance, understanding this was not play, but rehearsal for escape. He left with little money and no certainty, armed only with endurance learned from labor and tenderness learned from faith. Colville's legacy was not comfort, but fire. a frozen beginning that shaped a man the world would one day know as the unchallenged king of daytime television. A legend born not from ease, but from the quiet agony of refusing to remain unseen. Leaving Utah did not mean peace. Anthony Giri stepped into the world carrying restlessness and $42 that felt heavier than fate. Opportunity meant motion, not security. Hunger followed him like a shadow. Then at 22, a question cracked his life open when Jack Albertson asked if he wanted to go on tour. With no plan and no net, Anthony chose risk over erasure. He slept in costume to survive the cold, counted coins for coffee, and absorbed rejection until it stripped him thin. Yet under stage lights, he burned with an intensity that felt like oxygen. Hunger, he later said, reveals truth. Los Angeles tested him without mercy. He drifted through borrowed rooms, endless auditions, nights spent working whatever kept him alive. Small television roles asked everything and promised nothing. But he gave his soul to every second because proof of existence mattered. In 1971, a quiet rupture arrived when All in the Family cast him as Roger, a character written to be dismissed. Anthony refused dismissal. He gave the role humanity and pain, forcing television to look at what it tried to ignore. That same year, producer Gloria Monty recognized the fire others had tried to starve. From that collision, a legacy began to form. Fame did not approach gently. In 1978, at 31, Anthony Giri stepped into Luke Spencer, a role meant to last weeks that became a lifetime. Luke was volatile, scarred, morally torn. Anthony did not soften him. He exposed him. What followed was unprecedented. Millions watched daily. The success built fortune and legend, but also a cage that gleamed too brightly to escape. In November 1981, the wedding of Luke and Laura drew more than 30 million viewers, turning television into ritual. Inside the spectacle, Anthony felt something close and lock. The world fell in love with Luke, and the man behind him began to vanish. 13 weeks became decades. Across more than 11,000 episodes, exhaustion carved into bone. Pain followed. Awards arrived not as relief, but as markers of surrender. By 2015, spinal damage made standing unbearable. He asked for no spectacle, only quiet departure. Retirement was not retreat. It was survival. Anthony Giri gave youth, health, and peace in exchange for immortality. His life leaves a lesson written between the lines. Greatness is carved from pain and paid for dearly. When the lights finally dimmed, what remained was endurance, honesty, and the courage to step away. The world remembers Luke Spencer. Those who look closer remember a man who carried truth without vanity and pain without bitterness. Anthony Giri's echo will not fade. It lives in every performance that dares to be honest. Comment 78 or write "Rip Anthony Giri" to honor them. Behind the thunder of applause and the endless repetition of his name, a quieter truth tightened around Anthony Giri year after year. Fame did not merely follow him. It pressed inward, narrowing the space where the man could breathe. Each time he stepped into Luke Spencer's clothes, the line between performance and surrender thinned further. What began as acting slowly transformed into occupation of the self. The character refused to stay confined to script pages. Luke lingered after cameras shut down, after sets went dark, after the city outside surrendered to sleep. Anthony would lie awake, listening not to dialogue but to silence, heavy and watchful, as if another presence shared the room. He once admitted that when the cameras stopped, Luke did not. The role had taken root too deeply, entwining itself with his pulse. There were moments he wished Luke could vanish, not from resentment, but from fear. Fear that the pain that made Luke human would be smoothed away, leaving Anthony hollow in return. Yet he understood the cruel symmetry. If Luke disappeared completely, something essential within him might vanish too. Leaving was never simple. Contracts and fame mattered less than an unfinished conversation with himself. He returned again and again, searching for the fragment of identity buried behind the character's eyes. In that struggle lived an unspoken lesson. Endurance always exacts a price, and greatness is never free. Beyond the studio walls, another complicated bond unfolded between Anthony Giri and Genie Francis, the woman who became Lara in television's most legendary romance. Their connection was forged under pressure few could understand. Anthony survived through discipline and control, building armor around his emotions. Genie moved through instinct and openness, feeling everything fully. When storylines tore Luke and Lara apart, that difference deepened. One withdrew, the other reached. Words grew scarce. Silences stretched heavy with meaning. Each shared glance carried exhaustion alongside tenderness. Yet out of that friction came something rare. Respect that survived disappointment. Forgiveness that outlasted misunderstanding. An unspoken bond between two people who built a cultural legend and carried its ghost in different ways. After Anthony's quiet departure from the show in 2015, Genie spoke of him with grace, saying she learned more from him than language could hold. Anthony, in turn, called her the heart of it all, a gentle acknowledgement that sealed decades of unspoken truth. Their story was not only about love on screen, but about endurance off it, about carrying something vast without letting it destroy the soul entirely. When the cameras finally fell silent, it was Claudio Gama who remained beside Anthony Giri in the hours where performance no longer mattered. Away from expectation and image, Anthony could finally exist without armor. He could laugh without calculation, grieve without witnesses, and rest without explanation. In that private space lived the most honest chapter of his life. Survival itself became an act of courage. Becoming fully human again proved to be the hardest role he would ever inhabit. The world adored Luke Spencer, the rebel wrapped in charm and danger. But what it loved most became Anthony's most exquisite prison. Applause swelled so loudly it drowned out his own breath. Every cheer reminded him of the man he was not allowed to be. As Luke rose higher in the public imagination, Anthony receded further from himself. It was within that suffocating silence that Claudio entered his life, not as a fan or a headline, but as stillness. They met in the early 1990s, at a time when even a whisper could shatter a career. To the world, Anthony sold romance every afternoon. In truth, he lived guarded and restrained, protecting his heart as though it were contraband. Claudio offered patience instead of performance, warmth instead of perfection. Their early connection was cautious, coded, almost invisible. Glances held just long enough. Words weighed carefully. One quiet evening after filming drained Anthony to emptiness, they sat across from each other in a dim cafe. When Claudio's fingers brushed Anthony's wrist, it was not dramatic, not staged. Yet in that simple human touch, Anthony felt fear and freedom collide. He later wrote that he had lived behind bars so long he had forgotten how breathing felt. From that night on, they built a love in fragments. Small gestures, unsent letters, shared silences. Their relationship was not rebellion. It was survival. For 3 decades, their love lived in quiet exile, shaped by caution and endurance. Anthony confessed to a friend that fame feeds you until you forget hunger, then starves you of everything that matters. There were days he looked in the mirror and could not tell whether he was Luke, adored by millions, or Anthony, invisible even to himself. Then, in February 2025, the weight of secrecy finally cracked. Claudio shared a single photograph. 2 men leaning over a simple meal, light, soft, and forgiving. Their smiles fragile, almost disbelieving. The caption marked 30 years since they met and 6 years of marriage. In that moment, the world finally saw Anthony Giri not as a legend, but as a man who had survived long enough to live honestly. In Amsterdam, far from scripts and spotlights, they built a life of simplicity. Morning coffee, quiet laughter by the water, 2 chairs by a window as evening settled. No cameras, no cues, just peace. Neighbors sometimes heard hesitant piano notes drifting through open windows, unfinished but alive. When the music stopped, the silence no longer felt cruel. It felt earned. After decades under relentless lights, Anthony Giri's body began to rebel. His spine, burdened by years of discipline and endurance, fractured under accumulated strain. Pain was no longer ignorable. It turned movement into negotiation, breath into effort. Still he showed up. Still he delivered every line with precision. Pain, he later reflected, teaches you how much of yourself you have been borrowing from tomorrow. Surgery became unavoidable. In 2014, he entered the operating room not in surrender, but defiance. Recovery stripped life to essentials. Learning to stand again. Learning to trust his body. Leaving General Hospital in 2015 was not abandonment. It was an act of dignity. In Amsterdam, he discovered a slower rhythm. Walks along canals. Books stacked like old friends. Nights no longer ruled by pain. Even so, fate was not finished testing him. Another surgery came in his final years. Those close to him recall calm resolve, humor edged with gratitude. He spoke not of fear, but of love and time. On December 14th, 2025, after complications from surgery, Anthony Giri took his final breath at home, far from cameras and applause. For the world, it marked the end of an era. For Claudio, it was devastation beyond language. The quiet routines they built together now echoed with absence. Tributes poured in, celebrating records and characters. But Anthony's truest legacy lived away from headlines, in restraint, honesty, and the courage to endure without bitterness. He was not defined by trophies alone, but by the standard he set. He proved daytime television could carry depth, darkness, and truth. His absence is vast. His presence remains. Comment 78 or write "Rip Anthony Giri" to honor them. When the noise of the world finally receded, Anthony Giri's life narrowed into something both smaller and infinitely more honest. Without call times or scripts waiting on a table, silence surrounded him in a way it never had before. At first, that silence felt dangerous, like standing at the edge of a vast and unfamiliar sea. For decades, quiet had existed only between takes, brief and temporary. Now it lingered. It stayed. And Anthony had to learn how to live inside it without disappearing. He discovered that stillness could either hollow a person out or slowly teach them who they were beneath the roles they had worn. In those early months away from the screen, there were moments when he reached instinctively for a script that was no longer there, when his body prepared itself for a performance that would never come. The habit of becoming someone else had been carved too deeply to vanish overnight. Yet with time, that reflex softened. He began to sit with himself, sometimes uncomfortably, sometimes with unexpected peace. He read slowly. He listened more than he spoke. He allowed days to pass without achievement or applause. In doing so, he confronted a truth he had long postponed. That identity, stripped of work, can feel frightening, but it can also feel free. Anthony Giri never spoke often about regret, but those close to him understood that reflection had become his quiet companion. He did not wish his career away. He understood what it had given him and what it had taken. Fame had offered security, recognition, and a platform that few ever reach. It had also demanded secrecy, sacrifice, and a relentless endurance that left marks no award could erase. He carried those contradictions without complaint. When asked in private moments about his greatest accomplishment, He did not name Luke Spencer or records broken. He spoke instead of survival, of staying kind in a world that profits from hardness, of choosing integrity even when compromise would have been easier, of knowing when to step away before bitterness took root. Those were victories no audience ever applauded, but they mattered to him more than anything engraved in gold dot. His relationship with Claudio Gama deepened in this quieter chapter, no longer shaped by hiding or restraint. Together they built days that did not need explanation. Morning routines became sacred. Shared meals turned into small ceremonies of gratitude. They spoke of ordinary things with reverence, because ordinary had once been denied to them. Anthony found comfort in repetition not dictated by production schedules, but by choice. He learned the geography of his own neighborhood. He greeted familiar faces without fear of recognition. In those simple interactions, he felt something he had rarely known: ease. Claudio became not just a partner, but a witness to the man Anthony was becoming after decades of being someone else. In that presence, he could admit exhaustion, uncertainty, even vulnerability, without fearing that it would diminish him. It did the opposite. It restored him. Time, however, is never neutral. Even in peace, the body remembers what it has endured. Anthony's health remained fragile, shaped by years of strain and surgeries that had extended his career at a heavy cost. Pain did not vanish simply because the cameras did. Some days were manageable. Others demanded patience and restraint he had learned long ago. Yet his relationship with pain changed. It was no longer something to conquer for the sake of performance. It was something to acknowledge, to move alongside rather than through. He accepted help without shame. He rested without guilt. These were lessons he might have once considered weakness. Now he recognized them as wisdom earned too late to ignore Dot in conversations with those he trusted. Anthony spoke about legacy with surprising clarity. He did not want to be remembered as untouchable or larger than life. He wanted to be remembered as honest, as someone who showed that even within the rigid structure of daytime television, truth could survive. He believed art mattered only insofar as it respected the audience's intelligence and emotional reality. He took pride in having demanded more from a genre often dismissed, pushing it toward complexity and consequence. He understood that many viewers saw parts of themselves reflected in Luke Spencer, not because the character was perfect, but because he was broken and still standing. That, Anthony believed, was the highest compliment an actor could receive. As years passed, his world grew smaller by design. He declined public appearances. He avoided nostalgia packaged for consumption, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. He had given enough of himself to memory. What remained belonged to the present. In Amsterdam, seasons changed gently. Light shifted across water. Anthony found himself noticing details he once rushed past. The sound of footsteps on stone. The way afternoon settled into evening. These were not dramatic moments. They were human ones. And they mattered more to him than spectacle ever had. When another surgery became necessary in his later years, Anthony approached it with the same quiet resolve that had guided him through countless challenges. He understood risk. He understood limits. He spoke openly with Claudio about gratitude rather than fear. Gratitude for time, for love, for the chance to live honestly at last. He did not frame his life as tragic. He framed it as complete. He had given what he could, when he could, for as long as he could. That was enough. In that acceptance lay a peace that fame had never granted him. Anthony Giri's final days were marked not by drama, but by stillness. There were no grand speeches, no public farewells. Just the quiet dignity with which he had always faced what could not be controlled. When he passed on December 14th, 2025, the world responded with shock and sorrow. Headlines echoed his name. Tributes recalled records and iconic moments. Yet the truest grief lived elsewhere. It lived in the private spaces he had chosen when the spotlight faded, in the home he shared with Claudio, in the routines they built together, in the conversations that would now remain unfinished. For those who loved him, the loss was not of a legend, but of a man who had finally allowed himself to rest. Anthony Giri's story does not end with absence. It continues in the standards he set and the courage he modeled. He showed that endurance without integrity is hollow, and that knowing when to step away can be as brave as staying. His life reminds us that greatness is not measured solely by visibility, but by the quiet choices made when no one is watching. He gave truth to a medium that often avoided it. He carried pain without spectacle. And in the end, he chose honesty over applause. Comment 78 or write "Rip Anthony Giri" to honor them. In the aftermath of his passing, the world reached instinctively for familiar language: icon, legend, titan, words polished smooth by repetition. Yet none of them fully contained the shape of Anthony Giri's life. Those closest to him understood that what defined him most was not scale, but precision. He lived deliberately. He chose carefully. Every role, every silence, every endurance was measured against a private compass that rarely pointed toward comfort. Even at the height of his fame, when his face was woven into the daily rituals of millions, he remained inwardly distant from the mythology forming around him. He observed it as one might watch a storm from behind glass, aware of its power, but wary of its pull. That distance was not arrogance. It was protection. He had learned early that the world's hunger for symbols can devour the people behind them. As tributes poured in from colleagues and admirers, many spoke of Anthony's discipline, his exacting standards, his refusal to settle for ease. Writers remembered how he pushed for stronger material, how he challenged shallow choices, how he insisted that even a single line carry weight. Directors recalled his focus, his preparation, the way he arrived already carrying the emotional temperature of a scene. Younger actors remembered something quieter: how he listened, how he offered guidance without display, how he understood that vulnerability on screen required safety off it. He did not mentor through speeches. He mentored through example, by showing up, by caring deeply, by treating the work as something sacred rather than disposable. Anthony Giri never believed that longevity alone equaled success. He believed in consequence, in responsibility to the audience, in honoring the emotional investment viewers brought with them day after day. He understood that for many, General Hospital was not simply entertainment, but companionship, a steady presence during illness, loneliness, grief, or routine. That knowledge shaped his approach to Luke Spencer. He never played the character for admiration alone. He allowed Luke to fail, to hurt others, to carry guilt without easy redemption. In doing so, he trusted the audience with complexity. He believed they deserved truth rather than comfort. That belief changed daytime television permanently, even if it cost him personally. Away from public memory, Anthony's final years were defined by a gentler courage. The courage to be ordinary after decades of being extraordinary. He found satisfaction in small achievements invisible to the world. Walking a little farther without pain, cooking a meal from start to finish, sleeping through the night. These were victories that once would have seemed insignificant. Now they felt profound. Claudio Gama remained his constant, adapting quietly as Anthony's needs shifted. Their relationship was no longer shaped by secrecy or fear, but by care, by patience, by the unspoken understanding that love sometimes expresses itself through presence rather than words. Grief arrived differently for those who knew him best. There was shock, yes, but also a deep, aching gratitude. Gratitude that Anthony had known peace before the end. Gratitude that he had lived honestly, openly, without armor, even if only for a portion of his life. For Claudio, loss took on a physical weight, the absence of shared routines, the quiet where Anthony's voice once lived. Yet even in that emptiness, there remained something solid. The knowledge that their love had been real, sustained, and finally visible. That it had survived decades of restraint and emerged intact. As conversations turned toward legacy, one truth became clear. Anthony Giri left behind no simple inheritance. He left permission. Permission for actors to take risks in spaces that discourage them. Permission for writers to demand depth in formats dismissed as light. Permission for audiences to expect more. His influence extended beyond Luke Spencer, beyond General Hospital, into the very fabric of how daytime storytelling could be approached. He proved that repetition did not have to mean emptiness, that longevity could coexist with integrity, that even within rigid structures, truth could still find room to breathe. Those who study his career now will find contradictions that resist easy summary. A man celebrated for romance who lived much of his life in restraint. A figure of immense visibility who guarded his private self fiercely. An artist whose work reached millions, yet who often felt unseen. These contradictions were not failures. They were the cost of a life lived under pressure. Anthony understood that visibility and understanding are not the same. He accepted that the world might love the image without ever fully knowing the man. In time, he made peace with that divide. The enduring power of Anthony Giri's story lies not in perfection, but in persistence. He did not escape pain. He carried it. He did not conquer limitation. He negotiated with it. He did not transcend humanity. He embraced it slowly, deliberately, and at great cost. His life reminds us that art is not born from ease, but from attention. From listening closely to what hurts and refusing to look away. From offering something honest, even when it exposes the self-doubt in the quiet after his passing. As headlines faded and attention moved on, Anthony's presence remained in subtler ways. In reruns watched late at night. In performances that dared to be complicated. In viewers who saw themselves reflected and felt less alone. But these echoes do not demand recognition. They simply exist. And perhaps that is fitting. Anthony Giri never chased immortality for its own sake. He chased truth. And truth, once given, has a way of enduring long after the voice that spoke it falls silent. Comment. 78 or write Rip Anthony Giri to honor them.